Little Robert listened to his mom crying in the next room. He knew that he couldn't go in there yet. He had to wait until Roy left before he could go see how bad the damage was from the fight. Chances were Roy would either pass out drunk within 15 minutes, or he'd grab his keys and leave, heading down to the local bar to get even more wasted. It was a hell of a way to spend his 8th birthday. He had enjoyed the party earlier. All of his friends had attended, and he'd gotten loads of cool presents. But shortly after the last guest had left, Roy had started drinking. It had taken less than an hour for his mother to do or say something that had caused the fight. Robert knew it wasn't her fault. He could remember a time when his mother had been pretty and strong. Back when his real father, Robert Sr., had been alive, she'd smiled and laughed a lot. But when he was 6, his dad had died in a car accident, and his mother stopped living. She hadn't started dating until just last year, and the first person she'd picked was Roy. She'd met him at the bar where she worked 6 nights a week. At first, Roy had smiled and brought presents for them. Shortly after he moved into their small 2-bedroom apartment, the fights began. Robert didn't know why his mother kept him around, why she allowed him to still live there. There really wasn't anything the man was good for. After all, shortly before he'd moved in, he'd lost his job at the steel mill. Robert didn't like him not only because of this, but also because the man called him Robbie, which he couldn't stand. He always used a tone like he was making fun of him, or that he had a secret joke somehow tied up in his nickname. But his mother acted like she loved him, and so Robert had tolerated him. Plus, Roy had promised them both that he'd find a new job and take care of them. But then he'd started drinking. Robert even thought that he was using drugs, though he couldn't really tell. He never took drugs in front of him, but Robert had listened carefully to the police officer who had talked to his class when his school had a drug awareness week. The man had spoken about saying no to drugs, but hadn't really talked about how to tell if someone else was on drugs. After the officer's planned speech was done, Robert had walked up to him and asked him how to tell if someone else was on drugs. The man had looked at him funny, and then he sat down and talked to him, giving Robert a few things he should look out for. He asked Robert if he was okay, and tried to get him to tell him who Robert thought was on drugs. But Robert didn't want to get Roy, or worse, his mother, in any trouble, so he'd just told the man that there were some kids that bugged him on his walk home. He'd enjoyed talking to the officer, and had eyed the man's gun like it was candy. He knew guns were dangerous and needed to be handled by professionals, but man, he really wanted to see how much it weighed and feel how it felt in his hands. Maybe someday he'd get to hold a real gun and even fire it. Now he listened to Roy leave, then waited a few more minutes before he crawled out of his bed with his Spider-Man comforter and sheets. As he tiptoed down the short hall, he listened for the front door, just in case Roy decided to come back. If he did, Robert would make a bolt for his room. Roy had never hit him, probably because if he ever laid a hand on him, his mama would kill the man. She'd said so on many occasions. "Mama?" He pushed the door open and looked into the dark room. He could just make out his mother on the bed in the dark room. "Go back to bed, honey." He heard her sniffle, and she quickly rolled over, putting her back to him. He walked over to the other side of the bed and looked at her. "Mama, are you okay? Should I call the police?" "No, honey. We just had a fight. Roy's just stressed that he hasn't found a job yet." "Mama, did he hit you?" Robert had been asleep for the first part of the fight. All the sugar and running around during his party had worn him out. He'd actually gone to bed an hour earlier than normal. "No, baby. He just yelled." His mother sat up and turned on the light. Robert saw that her eyes were swollen red from crying. She still had on the dress that she'd worn for his party. It was her happy dress, as Robert liked to think of it. The pale yellow reminded him of better times with his father, for some reason. She patted the mattress next to her, and he climbed up next to her on the bed. When she wrapped her arm around him, he felt comforted. He loved the way his mother smelled, as fresh as a field of daisies. That's what his father had always said, and Robert had always agreed with him. "I'm sorry to wake you. Did you have fun today?" Being the 8-year-old boy that he was, he fell for the change of subject his mother provided and proceeded to talk for a few minutes about his party and all the cool presents he'd gotten that day. He fell asleep again, there in her arms, and she carried him back to his room and sung to him as she laid him back in his Spider-Man bed.